Welcome back. The late leader of Zimbabwe opposition MDC-T and former Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai has been repatriated to Harare. His widow, mother and the family have also left South Africa, where he passed away, to start events leading to his funeral on Tuesday. Tsvangirai lost his battle with colon cancer on Wednesday.
A mother dreading to bid her son farewell.
This is the former Prime Minister's mother, who's been by his bedside through this difficult times and to the last minute.
And a wife still struggling to come to terms with his passing. She says their journeys have separated. They left together, but now she comes back alone. She is sorry they have lost their father. Judging by the outpour of mourners since Tsvangirai's passing, the family appeals for support for events likely to be overcrowded.
I thank the President of the country and the government for all their assistance and what they're continuing to do. And again, I continue to appeal for more help. And in particular, I'm now appealing to the government once again for medical health facilities to be put in Bohera, because already we're hearing people have started fainting in Bohera. So we just need more toilets and more medical facilities. So if we can appeal to the President, to the Minister of Health, if they can assist us, we would really appreciate that.
It comes months before Zimbabwe holds its first election without his longtime rival, former President Robert Mugabe. Known as a champion of democracy, Tsvangirai fought to unseat Mugabe for 2 decades. The late Tsvangirai will spend the night at his Harare home. A memorial service will be held on Sunday, and he will be laid to rest in Buhera on Tuesday. Nthakoana Ngatane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, for more on this, I'm now joined in studio by our political reporter, Nthakoana Ngatane. Nthakoana, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Chabil.
Now, you were at the sending-off ceremony earlier today. Take us through the mood of the people who were there.
The people who were there, first of all, I think I have to note his mother, who's quite elderly, but apparently has been at his bedside since he went through this illness. And his wife, who left much earlier on in the day. His children were there, his brother, his sister, some MDC supporters from South Africa were there. And for the family, they say this feels more final now. You know, they've been dealing with this, they've been, talking about it. They thought that they were okay, but now they realize that this is the final moment. And of course, the body eventually left around 3 p.m. this afternoon to go to Harare, and his mother saying that she will remember that last moment when she was with him. His wife saying that for her, she came here to South Africa with him, but now she has gone back to Zimbabwe by herself, saying to the people she's sorry that she couldn't bring him back, or couldn't go back with him, and that their paths are now separated. So quite a somber mood really today.
I'm actually glad you mentioned the people of Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwean nationals in South Africa have had great things to say about Tsvangirai as a freedom fighter for their country specifically. Let's look at the current situation in Zimbabwe, considering there are those tensions that we've seen within the MDC specifically, and now he's passing. What does that mean for the politics in Zimbabwe?
I think one has to start with a statement that was issued by President Emmerson Mnangagwa. He acknowledges that although they've had their differences because they were on opposite ends of the political divide in Zimbabwe, Tsvangirai is a hero for democracy, that he has always fought for free, fair, credible and non-violent elections. Now, what comes to mind when he says that is those images of Tsvangirai when he was beaten up by the police in Zimbabwe following one election, and the president now, Emmerson Mnangagwa, acknowledging the role that he has played in Zimbabwe. But of course, there are tussles within his own party. You know that he started it in 1999, but it's split along the way. That's why you have MDC-T, which is Tsvangirai, and MDC-N, which is Ncube. They started the party together, but along the way they split. Now, when he was fighting for his life here in South Africa in hospital, the leaders, the two highest leaders within the party, and that is Nelson Chamisa and Edward Muzuri, were fighting about who is the acting leader. and now post his death, Chamisa has now been appointed the interim leader. But Muzuri was not in that meeting of the National Executive that nominated Chamisa to be in that position. He acknowledges Chamisa that going to these elections now, the party is faced with the mammoth task of uniting, but also trying to get other coalition parties to form a coalition going into the elections so that they can try and beat the ZANU-PF, which Morgan Tsvangirai tried to beat for the last 20 years.
Speaking of trying to beat the ZANU-PF for the longest time, do you think he clung on to that position and that hope for way too long?
Well, I think you have to look at what happened over that time. Again, I have to go back to the statement that was issued by President Emmerson Mnangagwa, saying that Morgan Tsvangirai crossed the political divide at a time when there were very polarizing elections in Zimbabwe many times. After the 2008 elections, he crossed the divide and went into a government of national unity with ZANU-PF and became the Prime Minister, which is why we call him former Prime Minister today. But throughout that period, you saw a period where he went, as I say, from forming a party to it breaking up and him going into a coalition. So you see a man who all of this time was really trying to find the best way or the best solution really for the people of Zimbabwe. So perhaps this is why we've seen him throughout all these years.
I'd actually like us to stay on that point of the statement that President Emmerson Mnangagwa released, specifically that historic moment that we saw during Tsvangirai's illness, him going to visit him. Do you think these gestures of unity per se will continue in Zimbabwe going forward?
Well, if you listen to his family today, his niece, who was speaking on behalf of the family, said while there are people who have different political affiliations, even within the party itself, they appeal for him to be honored in unity by the people of Zimbabwe. Now you go to the statement that was made by President Emmerson Mnangagwa and the visit that he paid to Tsvangirai when he was ill at home in Zimbabwe, and him coming out again with a message despite the challenge that you know he's facing with the Matabeleland massacres, where every time he comes out in public, even though he preaches unity, people still remind him that he needs to reckon with what happened, or at least explain what happened with Matabeleland. So all of these things, as they're happening, you see the underlying message coming out of the people of Zimbabwe to say, even if we are divided in the MDC-T, let's unite for Morgan Tsvangirai, let's unite for Zimbabwe. So this is a message that you hear time and time again.
I mean, just staying with that, initially when former President Robert Mugabe stepped down, there was a lot of excitement. And analysts did say this will last a certain time and the reality will hit the people of Zimbabwe because rebuilding is difficult. Is that a fair statement to make?
I suppose so. I think if you look at Emmerson Mnangagwa when he was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he has been going around the region, going to different countries. Only last week he was in Botswana, and the first country that he visited after he was inaugurated as president was South Africa, because he felt that, of course, he was here, as he say, as a diasporian for those few days after he fled Zimbabwe after Robert Mugabe was ousted, or leading to Robert Mugabe's ousting when he was fired as deputy president. But when you look at him and what he's trying to do, you realize, and when he speaks, he really does acknowledge that it won't be as easy as it is said. Fair enough. When he speaks, you can hear a man who understands, because he's been in government all of these years, so he has at his fingertips what needs to happen. But it won't be that easy, because he talks about, for instance, relaxing the indigenization laws in Zimbabwe, and these are the things that some people welcome, but some are skeptical, especially those who left under the circumstances of the farmer tax in Zimbabwe and so on and so forth. So these are just some of the things that Zimbabwe has to grapple with. You have a lot of Zimbabweans in the diaspora, starting with South Africa, who came here because they felt that they couldn't make a living in their own country. And some still remain in South Africa, say that they're afraid to go back. Yes, they see the hope, but whether or not it is real, will take a lot of doing.
Nthakoana, we'll have to leave it there for the segment now. A little later in the bulletin, we'll be taking live visuals of that repatriation process as the body of Morgan Tsvangirai arrives in Zimbabwe. And our political reporter, Nthakoana Ngatane, will still be joining me. Time now for a short break. We'll be back after this.